Hi, my name is Sartaj Sohal, and I will be talking about African enslavement. During the 16th century, the beginning of the Mafa, or African Holocaust, would occur. Slaves were captured and sold for money, and trade routes were established. Their land was taken away along with their rich and abundant resources. The population was reduced due to the millions that were captured or killed, which led to African underdevelopment. An estimated of 10 to 12 million Africans were brought across the Atlantic for enslavement, and that number would continue to grow greatly until the 18th century. In the 1800s, Africans were seen as savages because their continent showed no advancement in civilization. They had no laws, no formal government, no wars, no weapons, and no developed civilization. Due to these absences, they were regarded as savages. Europeans saw Africa as a large land made up of forests, jungles, and nature. Because of this, Europeans believed Africa was a free continent to colonize. A schema of social evolution was established that showed the evolution of a people, the very basic being primitivism, then savagery, then barbarism, and then the most evolved being civilized. Slavery was justified and explained through religion and the Bible. Genesis 9:18 through 27 tells the story of Noah and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Noah was drinking wine and was found lying on the ground naked. Ham saw his father but didn't do anything, and instead told his two elder brothers, and they covered their father. When Noah woke up and found out Ham had left him there, he placed a curse on him and his son Canaan. Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. Europeans argued they would assist Africans in their evolution because they were less developed. Boring St. Vincent believed that there was a missing link between humans and apes. A racial hierarchy was created that had the Hottentots at the very bottom, which led him to believe that they were the missing link between humans and apes. It was also rationalized by comparing the bodies of Africans to the bodies of apes and monkeys. Scientists and researchers who studied African anatomy developed many different ideas to justify the enslavement of Africans or what could be done to help them. Charles White argued that blacks were a separate species and were closer to the animal kingdom rather than humans due to their physical features. Benjamin Rush believed that black skin was a disease and could be cured to become white. Samuel Cartwright believed blacks had a deficiency in red blood cells and brain size, and that slavery and physical labor would help them become more developed. Thomas Jefferson argued blacks were underdeveloped intellectually and slavery would lead them to become more developed. Blacks were seen as an inferior species, and Jefferson suggested getting rid of them and sending them back to Africa. Eugenicist Francis Galton believed ignorance, crime, violence, and other forms of misbehavior was linked to their genetics. Eugenics led scientists to believe that blacks would act out and misbehave or act violently because it was a part of their heredity and genetics. Europeans saw themselves as a superior race and Africans as the inferior race. Due to religion, anatomical differences, cultural differences, and scientific underdevelopment, slavery was seen justifiable and would continue on both sides of the hemisphere.
Africans were enslaved in the United States in the early 17th century. By the time the American Revolution was rolling around and the invention of the new Constitution in 1787, slavery was a dying institution. By the year 1800, however, African slavery was once again booming the economy of the South. The reason being because of Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin, which allowed southern plantation owners the ability to grow different varieties of cotton and other cash crops, such as tobacco, hemp, corn, and livestock. A field hand's day was full of physical labor, which started from dawn all the way to sunset, picking these cash crops like cotton and tobacco, with only a 2 hour break to eat breakfast or lunch at noon. Africans had no control of the threat of physical punishment from their overseers and masters. Despite overall harsh conditions, slave cabins provided one of the few places where enslaved can be free. Slaves created a social and culture beyond the reach of their masters and overseers. They sought to make the best in their circumstances. They succeeded to an extent. Enslaved Africans showed the endurance of the human spirit. Because of escaped slaves in the North and their tremendous effort, slavery was finally abolished December 6, 1865, as the 13th Amendment.
Hi, my name is Malia Rivers and I will be discussing the changes in slavery over time. Slavery was a central institution in American society during the late 18th century. It was accepted as normal and applauded as a positive thing by many white Americans. This acceptance of slavery began to be challenged in the Revolutionary era. The challenge of slavery came from the revolutionary ideals, new religious commitment that stressed the equality of all Christians, and from a decline in the profitability of tobacco in the most significant slave region of Virginia. Slavery began to decline in the states north of Delaware. Those states all passed laws outlawing slavery right after the war ended. However, the gradual emancipation laws took quite some time to come into effect. They usually only freed children of current slaves, and sometimes even then they waited for the children to turn 25 years old. In the North, the peculiar institution continued. The peculiar institution was a euphemism for slavery and economic ramifications of it. Even in the South, there was a movement towards freeing some slaves. The free black population flourished in the states where tobacco production no longer demanded large numbers of slaves. By 1810, one-third of the African American population in Maryland was free. Delaware's free blacks dramatically outnumbered enslaved African Americans by 3 to 1. The new free black population created a range of public institutions for themselves. They usually used the word African to announce their distinctive pride and insistence on equality. The rise of the free black population is one of the most notable achievements of the Revolutionary era. Slavery no longer exists in America today, but it does unfortunately exist in third world countries. Every year, thousands of boys and girls get taken away from their families and get put into child labor. They then begin a lifetime of hard work in factories, fields, and workshops in such places like Asia, Africa, and South America. Due to the child's lack of physical strength, it makes them easy to manipulate. Poor families need their children to work, and even some start as young as 4 to 5 years old, either on the family's small holding or a landowner's estate. This could potentially prevent them from going to school. Some children as young as 6 years old are sent to work as a domestic servant in the homes of richer families. This is more likely to happen to girls than boys, though. Although slavery has ended in America, it's slowly progressing in other countries.
Hi, my name is Mariah Miller, and I'm going to be talking about the different types of slavery. There are different types of slavery other than when African Americans were being enslaved and forced to work in fields. There is also sex slavery, child slavery, and bonded labor. These types of slavery are not usually discussed and hardly recognized. Sex slavery can include women and children. Sex slavery is when someone is found someone is forced into having sex with someone against their will. Money is sometimes exchanged, and if it's not money, then it's food, shelter, or drugs, or anything that holds leverage. Sex slaves are usually exploited in the commercial sex industry, including pornography, prostitution, strip clubs, online escort services, residential brothels, fake massage parlors, or any exchange of a sex act for something of value. Child slavery. Child slavery consists of a child under 18 forced into doing any type of hazardous work. And bonded labor or debt labor describes slaves in which someone has to work in order to repay a debt. Sometimes the contract conditions are illegal, making the terms more beneficial to the employer instead of the laborer. So the workers have no choice but to continue working, and then they become slaves, and they cannot pay off their initial debt because of the contract terms. They cannot leave. Those are just some forms of slavery I thought I should point out and talk about. Now I'm going to talk about how slavery is viewed today and how it is seen by others. In my opinion, slavery is not over. I still see forms of slavery today. Lynching and police brutality share an interest and similarity because the lynching was when white men and also white men in power used to hang African Americans by rope onto trees when they misbehaved, as they would call it. And now in today's world, you see over the news white police officers, which is a white man who has power, killing young black boys all over the world, and nothing is happening to the white man of power or the police officers. All of the killings didn't make it into the media, have such, but some killings such as Trayvon Martin, Oscar Grant, Michael Brown, and 12-year-old Tamir Rice, and the list continues. But how I see slavery today is not how others see it often. Some people say the police killings mean nothing, they just happen to be in the media, and that the officers were just doing their jobs. Some people also believe that slavery is over and that everyone is free to do what they want, but they're wrong because they only acknowledge one type of slavery, which was when African Americans were being enslaved. But there are plenty forms of slavery that is still going on today, and it's not recognized by many. Globally, the average cost of a slave is only $90. There are 20 to 30 million slaves in the world today. 800,000 women and children are traded across international borders and countries. One black man is killed every 28 hours by a police officer. And slavery has been going on since the 1600s. And although white people aren't making African Americans work against their will anymore, there are still different forms of slavery happening today in this world. And people don't even recognize it or acknowledge it or find time to even discuss it.